Welcome back for episode 8 of Strange, Creepy and Mysterious Things I Found on the Internet, a series where I cover smaller internet mysteries and a range of unsettling media from Reddit posts to YouTube videos. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. I also have a Patreon and a PayPal, so if you're interested in supporting the channel, feel free to check those out, links will be in the description. You can head over to my Patreon for an uncut version of this video, which features a whole extra entry that was too disturbing for this cut. Thanks to Cutty Sobs for recommending this mystery in the comments of another video. In the window of a shop in Chihuahua, Mexico in March 1930, a mannequin appeared that was far more detailed and lifelike than any other the customers had seen. She had brown-grey hair, thick eyelashes, eyebrows, a natural expression, and most notably, very realistic hands, and even varicose veins. Pascualita owned the shop at the time, and the mannequin was placed in the window shortly after her daughter was bitten by a black widow spider and died on her wedding day. The mannequin somewhat resembled the daughter, which sparked rumours that it was actually her embalmed corpse, and that it was haunted. Many people over the years claimed that her eyes would follow you around the room, or she'd smile at you when you walked past, and employees said that she changed position during the night. One said, "Every time I go near Pascualita, my hands break out in a sweat. Her hands are very realistic and she even has varicose veins on her legs. I believe she's a real person." Others have claimed that the veins disappear over time and red veins can be seen in her eyes. Her clothes were reportedly changed twice a week behind curtains, and only a select few were allowed to dress her, one of whom said that the body was not that of a mannequin. Pascuala denied the rumours that it was her daughter's corpse, but they persisted, and even to this day there's some debate over it. The vast majority of experts agree that it's highly unlikely that the mannequin is a corpse because it would need to have been embalmed perfectly and kept in the right conditions, and even then it would need constant work doing to keep it in good condition. It was in the window of a shop for over 80 years, in a hot country, so you'd expect it to have deteriorated significantly in that time. There was an Ask a Mortician video about La Pascualita in which Caitlin said that it's nearly impossible that she's a corpse. If you look at the face, it's very impressive for a mannequin, but there are one or two features that look artificial. For example, the hairline is much fuller than it tends to be on people. That said, the hands are uncanny. They just look so realistic and you can see various lines in them and even the intricate texture of the skin. If someone showed me a photo of just the hands, I'd have no doubt that they were real. In addition, the cuticles have reportedly dried out and receded, just like they would on a corpse. I'm sure there is a logical explanation for that, and there is so much he said she said in this story that I'm not sure what to believe anymore. An alternative legend surrounding the mannequin is that she was just a normal wax figure until a French magician discovered her and brought her to life every night while the store was closed so they could go and dance around town, and then he'd return her the next morning. The third and final story suggests that when Pascuala died, her soul entered the mannequin and she remained inside it, conscious but unable to move anything but her eyes. As someone who doesn't really believe in the paranormal, I'm not convinced that the doll is alive or that it has a spirit inside it. The most plausible story would be that it was a corpse, but even that doesn't really hold up to scrutiny, especially so many years later. Naturally, the legend of La Pascualita is good for business, and when asked for the truth about the mannequin, the current owner of the store simply winked and said, "Is it true? I really couldn't say." According to topadventure.com, in October 2017, she was taken to Mexico City to be part of an event that had the objective of honouring the most famous legends of Mexico. She returned 8 months later, though many believe that she had been swapped for a different mannequin because she no longer looked so lifelike and her features appeared to have changed slightly, and since then, locals have noticed that they no longer feel so uneasy around her. It has been suggested that she fully came to life and ran away. She purportedly disappeared for a day or two a few years prior and returned with mud on the bottom of her dress. Though the owner claimed that it is still the same mannequin, they'd just given her a modern makeover. It's also possible that the original mannequin was damaged or maybe even stolen and the owner replaced it, hoping no one would notice so the business wouldn't suffer. few months ago, a Reddit user posted this on r/AskUK. This one's weird, but probably a rational explanation exists. Hope not, I want it to be mysterious. Every 4 to 5 months for the last 5 years or so, 2 different for sale signs appear on a house near me. With the exception of the last sale, the house never appears on the website of either company the signs are for. Now comes the really odd bit. After a period, maybe a month or so, the sold signs go up and they move out. A massive skip turns up and everything goes in it. I mean carpets, curtains, light shades, kitchen shit, everything. The skip gets collected, the house then sits clearly and visibly empty for around 10 days until the exact same family move back in. Same cars and everything. A shit ton of Amazon, IKEA and DFS packaging appears for recycling. The new stuff goes up and the cycle repeats a few months later. Signs up, everything in a skip, and off they The only other thing of note is that since I've been paying close attention, covertly, I've noticed the signs appear to be the exact same ones. Not just the same design, but the same sign scratches in the same place, etc. Also, they had a lot of decorating done at night with the curtains shut. Spotted the decorators and possibly a Sparky about 1 AM going in the door, and I could see other workers inside. They're good friends with people on the other corner who, in the last 12 months, have had their garden landscaped twice, have had both their roof and patio professionally jet washed 4 times, the lawn turfed, removed, replaced with AstroTurf, that torn out and returfed and decked. During one of these works, they had hired a cement mixer, turning during work hours, and it was as clean and unused when it went back a week later as when it arrived. No one went near it except to turn it on, so they're obviously making a display of spending money, presumably to clean it up, but I can't get my head around the other people and the house sale thing. Any ideas? This honestly has me stumped. A couple of the points might not be as suspicious as they sound. For example, the workers in at unsociable hours. Maybe the neighbours have unusual working hours and that was the time that fit them best. OP said they're pretty well off, so they could probably afford to have people fit around them. The neighbours also having pointless work in their garden that then gets reversed is odd and feels like it has to be connected to the first neighbours, considering they're all good friends, but it might not be. Perhaps they just changed their mind a couple of times. They too probably had the money to be able to afford that, and the work OP noticed they had done is nowhere near as suspicious as everything that's going on with the first neighbours. I can think of a few reasons why they might keep redecorating and getting new furniture. Maybe they're influencers who focus on home decor, so they're constantly changing the house for new content. Throwing everything in the skip seems such a waste though, unless they had some kind of infestation that would require them to get rid of furniture and vacate the house for a few days, but I imagine that would only apply to soft furnishings, and it's happening way too often for that to be the case. Maybe it's an insurance scam and they pretend the items were stolen, though you'd think that would eventually arouse suspicion after doing it every 4 to 5 months for 5 years. Regardless, neither of those would explain the for sale signs and the fact that they seem to actually move out for around 10 days before moving back in. The comments don't seem to offer many good explanations for this either, mostly just more theories for the furniture getting binned. For example, the house is part of a training program for decorators or tradespeople. It's a product testing home for taking photos of furniture to be sold in a real property. It's the set of an adult movie, which would suggest that the workers were actually actors, or the neighbours are growing cannabis and they clear the house out to get rid of the smell. There were some other theories that explained some aspects of the post, but not all, one of which is that the house is used for a TV show, or multiple TV shows or movies, either reality shows about renovating houses or people moving into new houses, or scripted shows as one user suggested because they don't believe reality shows would have the budget to continuously replace the furniture. This could explain the for sale signs, especially if it was a so-called reality show that's set up to make it look like someone is moving into their new home, but it's actually occupied by others who rent it out for that purpose. It might also account for all the furniture being thrown in a skip rather than being sold or donated, as most would. Then again, they are rich, so they could probably afford to bin things rather than have the hassle of finding them a new home. Considering OP has started to become suspicious and therefore paid more attention to whatever is going on, you'd think they'd notice a camera crew or other signs that a TV show or movie was being filmed there if that was the case. Thinking back to the adult movie set idea though, I imagine the crew might try to be a little more discreet so there's less chance OP would notice, and I guess the plot could revolve around someone moving into a new home, or an estate agent showing a potential buyer around. I'm sure you can use your imagination. which might explain the for sale signs. This theory could account for the furniture getting skipped too. There's probably only so many bodily fluids that can gather on a sofa before it needs to go, and perhaps they decorate often to make it seem like a new set each time. One point that makes me doubt this is the length of time it's been going on. Admittedly, I don't really know anything about the production of such content, but I assume they wouldn't use the same place with the same theme for 5 years. A few comments suggested it must be a money laundering scam of some kind, and while I'm inclined to believe that money is somehow involved here, because why else, I'm not sure exactly how it would work, and they're not exactly being inconspicuous. Clearing the house out and hiring people to work on it every few months is not only going to attract attention, but add to the cost of the front too. One final theory we'll cover sounds a bit ridiculous, but it might be the only one that could explain most of the points in the post. A comment that suggested it read, "The only thing I can think of is that they like the idea of having a new home and planning new furnishings, etc., but they don't really want to move. They pretend they are moving as part of the fun of the fantasy, and they don't care about spending money. They play act to themselves they are moving to a new house and enjoy buying new furniture, changing the decorations, etc." It all sounds like a lot of effort to go to just to simulate the excitement of moving, but if they're rich and have a lot of free time, I guess it's not impossible. People do stranger things. A recording of an apparent 911 call has circulated on the internet for years. You can hear an old lady named Ruth Price telling the operator that a man is hanging around her property. She goes quiet for a moment, then lets out one of the most horrifying screams I've ever heard, and suddenly the line goes dead, leaving us to assume that she was murdered by the man. Some articles actually state that she was killed, though they never provided any proof of that, or that the recording was even authentic. A popular theory was that the call was used for training 911 operators as an example of how not to react in a situation like that, as the dispatcher cut Ruth off before she gave a full address, and a couple of people online claimed to have been shown that call during their training. It was alleged that she had been assaulted, then murdered before she could be located. Still, the mystery wasn't considered solved because these were just random people on the internet, most of whom were relaying information they vaguely remembered hearing years ago anyway, and there were no articles or obituaries to back up that story. When Scare Theatre contacted various 911 training centres, either they had never heard of Ruth Price, or the call in question, or they weren't able to verify that it was real. Was Ruth a real person or an actor? And if she was real, what happened to her? These questions remained unanswered for years, with the occasional lead popping up here and there, but each led to a dead end. Internet sleuths had tried to find records of such an incident occurring and had no luck. They tried searching for a Ruth Price who could have been the caller, and one individual was found by that name, though their obituary said that they died after a long illness, so they didn't appear to be a match. Another Ruth Price was found, and this seemed even more promising because their address started with 3877 35th Street, and in the phone call when Ruth was giving her address, all she got out before she was cut off was 3877. However, once again it turned out that this woman had died after a long illness in 1994, so she didn't appear to be the same Ruth. After years of baseless speculation, the mystery was finally solved a few weeks ago by Reddit user FarValuable5819. They were listening to an episode of a podcast on the call that mentioned the Ruth that had died in 1994 when they decided to investigate the lead further and found some more information about her. She was born in Colorado in 1913 and married William Price sometime before 1935 when they were both listed as living in Pueblo, Colorado. William died in 1972, and the following year, Ruth was living at 3877 35th Street in San Diego, according to a directory. As already known, this Ruth died from an illness, but it had been suggested that she could still be the same Ruth if she managed to survive the attack. Until now, no records had been found to back this story up, but when OP was searching for a full obituary, they came across a newspaper clipping in a section titled Assaults from the 3rd of November 1980, which read, "Police are looking for a youth who tried to strangle a 76-year-old East San Diego woman yesterday. Officers said Ruth M. Price of the 3800 block of 35th Street was calling police to advise them of a prowler in the area when she was grabbed from behind and choked. She was able to break the attacker's grip after dropping the telephone, screaming and pulling at the attacker's hands. Price said she did not know why she was assaulted and had never seen the suspect before." It might be almost impossible to verify this for sure, but the details line up perfectly. All that was missing before is the outcome of the situation, as most assumed that Ruth had died during the attack. In addition to the claims made by some individuals online who may have been mistaken or intentionally fabricated the story, Ruth's scream was enough to make you believe that something terrible had happened, though in actuality there wasn't much else to suggest that, and it could have simply been a terrified old lady who panicked and overreacted. From the call alone, it's not clear that the man meant any harm. He could have had a few too many to drink and got the wrong house for all we knew. And if Ruth had been murdered, you'd think there would be some mention of that online, even if it was decades ago. Ruth not only fought off her attacker, but lived another 14 years after. The only way this mystery could have ended better is if the man was caught, though that doesn't appear to be the case, unless he was arrested for a different crime and never linked to this one. There had been some debate over whether the call was a 911 call or not, and assuming this is the same Ruth from the call, the incident happened 2 years before the emergency system was put in place in San Diego in 1982, so she had likely dialed 0 to talk to an operator who would have then connected her to the police had the call not ended so abruptly. That explains why the person talking to Ruth wasn't very helpful. I mean, they could have still been more helpful anyway, but they weren't a trained dispatcher for the emergency services specifically. It's good to get some closure on a mystery that I and many others began following years ago, and to think that the missing link was a small section in a newspaper from decades ago, probably not that hard to find, but no one had thought to check where OP did. It gives me hope for various other mysteries. The answers are likely out there, just waiting to be stumbled upon. On the 5th of August 1993, 39-year-old Joseph Paul Jernigan was executed by lethal injection. He'd been found guilty in 1981 of the murder of Edward Hale, a 75-year-old man who caught Joseph and an accomplice burglarizing his home. A prison chaplain suggested that he agree to donate his body for scientific and medical research after his execution. Not that it would make up for his crimes, but it would be his last chance to do something good for the world. He agreed, not knowing specifically what his body would be used for, which apparently some people took issue with. I guess informed consent is still of paramount importance when dealing with a cold-blooded murderer who already agreed for his body to be used for research and, is already dead. Anyway, although planning for the Visible Human project had started years earlier, Joseph's body was the first specimen. The goal was to create a data set of many cross-sectional photographs of the human body to serve as a public domain reference for the study of human anatomy. The cadaver was surrounded in a mixture, then frozen before being cut into 1,871 slices, with analogue and digital photos being taken at each slice. Cut and slices aren't exactly the right words to describe the process, but it's a simpler way of describing it. A machine actually ground away very thin sections. The process destroyed the cadaver. It's not like they were left with slices of a frozen dead body in the end. CT and MRI scans were also used to gain images that could be viewed alongside the photos of the slices, and the whole process was completed in November 1994. The following year, the process was completed on a female cadaver too, at the request of her husband, though not much information is known about her, other than she was an obese 59-year-old housewife from Maryland who died of heart disease. The female was cut into smaller sections, resulting in 5,189 images, around 40 gigabytes of data, compared with 15 gigabytes for the male. The project was revolutionary. Many scans, dissections, and even cross-sectional photos of a cadaver had been done before, but it was the first time that the whole body had been photographed at such tiny intervals, and it had many applications, not just in education, but for making prosthetic limbs and even art projects, to name a couple. It also led to the correction of a few details in anatomy textbooks, including the shape of a muscle in the pelvic area, which was previously misrepresented. Although the benefits of the project were significant, there were some problems with the datasets. From Wikipedia, freezing caused the brain of the man to be slightly swollen, and his middle ear ossicles were lost during preparation of the slices. Nerves are hard to make out since they have almost the same colour as fat, but many have nevertheless been identified. Small blood vessels were collapsed by the freezing process, tendons are difficult to cut cleanly, and they occasionally smear across the slice surfaces. The male has only one testicle, is missing his appendix, and has tissue deterioration at the site of lethal injection. Also visible are tissue damage to the dorsum of each forearm by formalin injection, and damage to the right sartorius from opening the right femoral vein for drainage. The male was also not cut while in standard anatomical position, so the cuts through his arms are oblique. The female was missing 14 body parts, including nose cartilage. The reproductive organs of the woman are not representative of those of a young woman. The specimen contains several pathologies, including cardiovascular disease and diverticulitis. The ideal specimen for the project would have been a totally healthy body, but most people don't donate their body for scientific research, so they kind of had to take what they could get. In 2000, Susan Potter volunteered herself after hearing about the project, but was turned down as soon as she met Dr. Spitzer, who led the project. Susan had gone through 26 surgeries, including a hip replacement, had been diagnosed with melanoma, breast cancer, diabetes, and had limited mobility, needing a wheelchair to get around. She was in a lot of pain and got to a point of not caring whether she lived or died, until she heard about the project and thought maybe God didn't think she was done with life yet. Dr. Spitzer bluntly told her that she was a pathology specimen, not an anatomy specimen, that they were trying to teach normal, and she wasn't normal. Susan was a badass though, and she wasn't about to let this poncy doctor crush her dreams, so she persisted and eventually they came to an agreement. Due to her health problems and the fact that she'd been in a major car accident, Susan was expected to die within a year, so Spitzer, drawn in by the idea of someone who was dead talking to you, agreed to use her body as the next specimen if she allowed National Geographic to record her life throughout that year. She actually lived another 15 years, told you she was a badass, and during that time she formed a friendship with Spitzer, even though he was somewhat reluctant initially. Her motivation to take part in the project was a mix of wanting to help advance research in general, and also to change how living patients were seen. She believed they should be treated as a whole person rather than as individual parts. Thanks to advancements in technology, the Visible Human project was even more successful with Susan's body, even though many parts of it didn't represent most people's bodies, and it was sectioned into 27,000 slices, allowing for a much more detailed picture. Corpses and the thought of them being grinded down and photographed may initially sound very creepy, and the National Geographic video on Susan, which shows her talking while she was still alive, and the process of preparing her body after she died, is even eerier. But this story is quite an inspiring one. Susan suffered a lot in life, and her death in 2015 was tragic because she'd left a mark on so many people, and the medical research community in general, but she didn't fear death, and she was still able to make a difference to the world when she was gone. Spitzer decided to document her life as well as her body after death because he thought it would be more impactful, and he was right. The male specimen is from a murderer that seemingly made a snap decision, and the first female specimen was anonymous. Neither of them were aware they'd be partaking in the project, so we never got to see what, if anything, it would have meant to them. It clearly meant a lot to Susan, and despite the odds being stacked against her, she persevered and made a huge impact as a result. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, plus any suggestions you might have for a future episode. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my patrons, whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday in a new video.